to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bridge the Gap. Excited for you guys to come and join us tonight. We got a great episode. We're going to be talking about, I think, a topic that is a little bit scary, a little bit mystical, and kind of, a big mystery to people. We're going to be talking about counseling and why counseling is important, why it's something you should be looking into, why I think everyone should be going to counseling and getting some help, not just only for your own mental health to deal with your traumas. And there's one person that I thought of that this was a topic he's perfect for. It's my good friend. You've probably seen him on Twitter. You've seen him on chats of other shows. It's Toronto Dave. He's always tweeting about counseling, talking about his journey with counseling. Dave, welcome into the show. How are you doing tonight?
Fantastic. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. I think this is going to be a good topic because I do think counseling is one of those things where it's not as taboo as it used to be back in the 90s, but I still think there's people who think of it as, kind of this dirty little secret, like you don't tell people you're going to counsel me. It's kind of this something you do in the shadows, but I do think we need to talk about it more because I think counseling is super important. So before we get in, tell everybody where they can find you, what you got going on, anything you want to, shout out.
Yeah, I'm Toronto Dave. I have nothing to shout out, no affiliations, just independent, happy to be involved. No articles or anything like that. I'm just happy to be in the community and just to be here.
And you're definitely like one of the most positive forces in the fantasy community. You're always there on Twitter and other social platforms, supporting people, shouting people out. You're in chats on, Front Yard Fantasy. I've seen you in chat here. For those who don't know, I did SiriusXM maybe 6 months ago, and Dave just screenshotted his SiriusXM where it said Dustin Lucky and sent me the screenshot. I didn't ask him to, he just did it. Those are the supportive things that I think are often overlooked in this community. So I always appreciate your supportiveness and all the fun stuff and the openness you have about your counseling journey and, working on your mental health. I think is super important because seeing someone else go, hey, this is what I do and it's okay, really helps other people. So we're going to be talking about counseling. If you're watching, join the chat. You can drop a question if you have questions about counseling or questions about anything, in that realm. You can ask me and Dave. We'll love to answer you live. Before we get into it, Dave, we always like to start the show with a game.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength.
Sweet. Okay, never mind then. I normally have a drop and it didn't play. I don't know what happens.
No problem.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength or athleticism. At its core, it's just a children's game, and I would wager that some of you here this evening have played Would You Rather?
So a classic game of Would You Rather, Dave. And in that counseling vein, something we always talk about is, are you a verbal processor or a kind of a writer processor? So would you rather have all your thoughts and conversations either printed out at the end of every day, or would you rather have them recorded for you so you can play them back at the end of the day?
Print it out, no question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's just how I process things. If something's verbal, I have a really hard time slowing down and parsing it through as it comes. It's just a little fast for me, especially because there's no break. It's just continual. So if it's written down, I could really pause and get into specific things and understand it before I move on to the next one. It just allows me more control over the pace.
That makes sense. And knowing you are much more of that kind of written processor. We've had chats where you've sent notes that you've sent over. I am much more of a verbal processor. So I'm an extrovert. So I love people and I love talking to people, and that's how I process. I am the master of just crazy notes and scratches on paper. But a lot of times I do that as I'm talking. I will, we were talking earlier, and I was just making notes on my little pad. I have this pad by my desk here when I'm podcasting. You can't see my hands, but I'm always scribbling little notes down. I think there's a benefit to both. I think written is great because you can slow it down and you can reread, and you can make notes in the margin. So anytime I read a book, there's always notes in the margin. I had a book that we've been going through, and I gave it to a buddy of mine. He's like, "What are all these like things in the margin?" I was like, "Oh, those are my notes. You won't be able to read them." And he's like, "I see you wrote a note here. What is this saying?" I go, "Oh, this says this." I'm trying to decipher my horrible handwriting, but I would love just be able to play them back. I can still pause it and rewind. I think it just for me that auditoriness of like listening to it and going, okay, this is, and you can get a little more inflection and tone. And I think you can just, and I can go, they said this, this is how I should have countered, or I can, in that moment, I can match my tone or change my tone. And it allows me to just have a little more nuanced, but I think both are good. I think it's just a matter of how you process things.
You raise a lot of good points, and you're making me question what I said.
I'm still you're good.
I'm still going to stick to the writing, but on the other end, communicating, I feel like I'm almost more effective speaking. So if I were to relay information, I think I'm better auditory, just because I feel more of a flow. But processing, I would say written.
See, it's funny when you're saying that, because I'm the opposite with you. If I want to relay information, I'm much better at it writing. I talk fast, I talk quick, I have a lot of thoughts in my head, and sometimes I stumble over my words. So I'm much better at communicating things in a written form. So I think we're both the opposite on either side. Whereas I intake information more audibly, but I can deliver information more written. Where you're the opposite, where you take it in the visual and kind of the reading it, but you want to process it verbally, which I think is really interesting that we're completely opposites on both sides, because I do think it plays into how you process and deliver information.
Absolutely. Very interesting.
Which is a big part of counseling, right? Because that was counseling is. It is you processing your information and relaying that to a trained counselor. So Dave, just talk to people like what is counseling and what is not counseling? Because I think that's a big thing that people kind of get mixed up sometimes.
Yeah. So I have notes here, but I'm going to do my best to maybe not look at them and try to.
If you need to read your notes. I think that's good. I'm glad you have notes prepared.
Yeah. So what is counseling? Counseling is a safe space where you can enter into difficult conversations, or what's difficult to get out. It's therapy or counseling. It's to have that space to challenge yourself, and no judgment. They're just there to listen. It's someone that's not in your life, so there's no biases. They're just there to get your perspective, and it's just a safe space to address things that may be difficult to address otherwise. And their counselors and therapists, they're trained and skilled to guide you. So it's very empowering. It's very empowering. And I guess what therapy is not is avoiding responsibility just by you go to therapy, you say anything, and you don't have to do anything else because you're blaming everybody else and you don't have to do any work. And from my experience, it's very much the opposite. That's when real hard work, certain hard work starts. It's taking ownership of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, not avoiding accountability for it. So it was almost eye-opening that you go to therapy and you start talking, and I think I'm just going to talk, and I have this ideas that what I think it's going to be, and it's going to be easy peasy, and no, it's very challenging in the best way. It pushes you forward to be your best self, and it gives you the tools to help manage challenges and the good times, and to be more in the moment, to be a better person, to others, to be more understanding towards others. My maturity has gone through the roof, and that has to do with having humility. So it can be easy to think you have therapy. Going to therapy means I'm the king and so everybody else is the issue, and I just talk about that. But it's very much looking inward to become the best version of yourself, and to learn and develop tools to deal with everyday life experiences.
Yeah, that's a really good synopsis. You brought up a couple good points in there. The safe space is huge because you can go and talk to other people, and you can go on a forum or a chat room and talk to random people, but it's not a safe space, and you're gonna get the trolls and you're gonna get the haters, and no matter where you are. And I think you brought up two really one things I want to point out too is the no biases and they're trained. And as much as our friends are great and they are an important part of our support system, your friends are not. That's not counseling. That is not therapy. People go, "Oh, this is my therapy." No, they're not. They're not trained, and they have all these biases in your life. Your friends, generally, you surround yourself with people who are, I don't want to say yes men or women, but they're very much super supportive of you, and they're always going to take your side for the most part. Yes, you may have a friend or two who's going to push and challenge you, but they have biases no matter what. And a lot of times those pushes and challenges come from their biases of, I know you, you are this way, and they're going to push you on that. So I think having a non-biased trained person to be a sounding board on some level is super important. And when I think therapy, I think what happened with therapy and counseling was in the 90s, we got this like Fraser Crane, you know, guy laying on a couch with this guy taking notes very serious. And it was like, oh, that, and it's like this deep seated issues. That's like, well, you do all this because of, your mother. And it's like, it's not always that. It is always just kind of things. And the times I've gone to counseling, it's been 90% me talking and 10% them talking. And the 10% is them just responding and maybe asking some probing questions and kind of pushing a little bit on certain areas or highlighting some thoughts they've had when they hear you talk and they go, oh, I noticed you said this, or I noticed you always do this, or I noticed your body language because they're trained in it. So I think that's really important because I think we get a lot of people who just go, well, I'm just going to go talk to my friends. I have really smart friends. I have really, intelligent friends. I have friends who took a psychology class. Yeah, they're important, but they're not counseling. They're not therapy. They're not trained and they're not unbiased. And I think you need to have someone who's unbiased and trained to really help you with therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's different areas of support, and therapy is so helpful. And I just wanted, you made a really good point that I just want to emphasize. It's not all, it doesn't have to be all serious and stern. That was there's a lot of humanity, and I've been lucky with my therapist. It's all about the relationship and the trust, but it's very human. It's not, from my experiences, you're talking to a human that they smile. They're like, they're people.
Yeah. They're people who have likes. I mean, I was going to one and he was a big Packers fan and he knew I liked football. So we get to our session. He goes, hey, before you go, how are the Packers going to do this week? I'm like, oh, they're doing good. Or how are they going to do the season? And we could talk about life outside of it. So what have you found in counseling that's been helpful for you most, Dave? Is it just the talking? Is it the processing? Is it the tools? So you kind of brought up, you get these tools, you get the process. What has been the most helpful for you in your journey through counseling?
Most helpful is to get out of talking so much and more into feeling. So
okay.
it's I can have, or it can be easy to intellectualize feelings without actually getting into feeling it. So for me, it's a lot of stress or anxiety or fear or pain. It shows up very physically, and it's about processing the somatic feelings along paired with the cognitive part. I was so used to just thinking and thinking and thinking, but if you don't feel it, you'll just think more. So what I found is the more, if I feel it, like let's say if I'm ruminating over something that's really bothering me, if I'm in therapy and I cry, I love it because that means I'll have less of a urgency, or not urgency, less of a desire or need to think about it anymore, because I processed it by feeling it, by going into it, and not just in the logical side of it, how it affects you on a personal human level. So getting into that space of operating within feelings and thinking simultaneously And that helps me process experiences on a day-to-day basis. So it's very interesting. It's not just thinking outside and then in therapy you talk about it more. It's taught me to slow down and feel what I'm feeling, allow myself to feel it, and don't fight it. Just be honest with how I feel, let myself get into that physical feeling, and together with the thinking, and not just completely go into the thinking part. And it humanizes myself in a funny way.
Good.
Yeah. So it's for me, a really big part of counseling is to learn to operate in an emotional space healthily.
Yeah, that's huge. When you started talking about talking versus feeling, I totally relate to that because there's times when, let's take anger. Something happens that makes me angry. I end up focusing more on the fact that I'm angry versus just being angry. And you ruminate, and when we talk about ruminate, it's like you're stuck on this one thing. Then you're stuck on the act that made you angry, not the feeling of being anger, and being angry and dealing with that. Because once you deal with the emotion, you can get past the emotion. Um,
Absolutely.
and I will say this: if you're listening and you got questions, drop in the chat. But I think every person should go to counseling at least for 6 months. Like you should at least do 10 sessions with a counselor. I think it's super important. I think you can learn something about yourself. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to counseling because I'm depressed, or I'm going to counseling because I have anxiety, or I'm going to counseling because of a drug addiction. Like it can just go because you want to be a better person. I think you can learn a lot about yourself. And that's why I want to talk about this because I do think there's that stigma of like, oh, you went to counseling, what's wrong with you? It's like, no, nothing's wrong with me. I just know I'm not perfect. And admitting you're not perfect is the first step in counseling. And getting to the point where you can process feelings and you can unpack those feelings and you can work through those feelings in a healthier and quicker way just makes you a better person.
Spot on.
And so, so for you, why is working through what may not be an issue? Why is working through a topic important to you? Because sometimes you're working through an issue, right? Of I feel neglected as a child. That might
Yeah.
be an issue you're working through, but it might also be like, hey, I'm just not super satisfied in life. And so why is working through those different variety of degrees of issues important to you? Because I think that's something people struggle with.
It allows you to be your best self. So it like strips away any weight that's holding you back, and allows you to be more in the moment and more freed up to be yourself. It's hard to fully be yourself if you're being brought down by heaviness that you're trying to process. So a huge thing with me is now a lot of let's say fears or certain challenges, they're less intense. So it allows me to be more in the moment, and allows to be more myself in the moment as well. So you get a better sense of self is a huge part of it. A better sense of self, and allows you to open up to be your best self in the moment.
Yeah, I think trying to be your better self is huge. And kind of what I said, like some people are going to go to counseling because they have big, strong wounds and trauma that they need to deal with. But there's other people who just need to go because they're not like they're just not, they just know they're not their complete selves. They're not their best self yet. Maybe they're just not super satisfied, or they feel uncontentment, or they feel dissatisfied, or they feel slightly angry, or just grumpy, or whatever. Like you can go through and unpack those things. And I do think if you can do these things, you can get self-help books, you can listen to podcasts, and you can take these like self-guided, meditations and counseling. But I do think you need to do it with someone else live. I want to say in the room, but we know that video, therapy is a big thing right now. And I think that's fine. Like a teleconference like this is still the same thing as they're in the room. So why do you think doing it with someone else versus on your own is important?
Great question. I love this question, because my therapist instilled in me, and I fully, wholeheartedly believe that life is about relationships and connecting with others, connecting with yourself and connecting with others. So it's just, life is personal. So it's going through life with other people. It's part of life. So it just helps bring so much clarity and understanding and different perspectives, and being challenged in the moment as things come up while you're feeling it. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. And I always tell people, like, you don't know what you don't know. And you may think you know everything about this, but you don't know what you don't know. And there's just different viewpoints. We can all look at an apple, and I may look at the apple and go, man, it's a fresh, crisp apple. But Dave, you got the other side of the apple and it's rotted on that side, or there's a wormhole. And I just don't see it because I'm not seeing it from that perspective. So you need to have someone else who has a different upbringing, again, has the training to maybe pick apart some of these things and kind of pull out some different nuggets. And just maybe they know what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And so that's why I think doing it with someone else is super important. I do think books and reading on different things are helpful, but I do think you need to get with someone and talk with them and talk with the trained professional. I've done books, and I've gone to my counselor and said, hey, I'm going through this book with some, friends at church. And he's like, oh, cool. Let me get a copy of the book. I'll read it so we can be on the same wavelength and kind of have the same terminology. And it just helps because then we're doing it together. And we are not meant to be solitary creatures. Your point is so good. Life is about community. Life is about being with other people. It's about relationships. That's why social media is such a big thing in our world, because people want to be social. Like, it's not media, it's social media. Like, that social is the part of it. You know, Tribalism is a term now because people want to be part of something. FOMO, so the fear of missing out, is not the only reason why you fear that you missed out is because someone else didn't miss out. If everyone missed out, you wouldn't have the fear of missing out. It's the fear that you missed out than everyone else, and you're going to be the only person that wasn't involved in that because you missed that relationship bonding experience. So you're right. Being with people is super important. And that's why I think you have to be in the room or live talking to someone. You can't leave a voicemail. You can't, talk to yourself on a tape recorder. You need to talk to someone else who has a different viewpoint, who can be in relationship with you. And let's just face it, the first time you go to therapy, it is a little, I don't want to say scary, but it is a little, like, nervous. It's like a first date almost, right? Because you're going in, you don't know this person. You're just meeting them for the first time, but I don't think it should be that scary.
Yeah. So it's challenging, but in the healthiest way possible, or in a very healthy way. So it can be scary, it can be anxious. Whatever you feel is what you feel. People feel different things. Exciting as well, unfamiliar. Yep. But it's very courageous and takes a ton of humility. So for anyone that wants to try therapy, I couldn't recommend it more. And I just want to reiterate something that you brought up, that you don't have to be struggling to seek therapy. You can think your life is awesome, everything's managed well, I don't even know how it can be better. I still recommend trying therapy just to see how it can improve your life. And I think that's very important. You don't have to be incredibly struggling to benefit from therapy. It's just another tool, like exercising or something.
Yep, I completely agree. You never know what could be. Again, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what else could be better. You may be going, my life is great, work is great, my relationships are great, my, you know, significant other and I are great, my family's great, everything's great, 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 but you don't know what else could be better. And so counseling helps that. So, I know BetterHelp, which isn't a sponsor. So BetterHelp, if you want to sponsor my podcast, that'd be great. BetterHelp is an online service where you can go and you can meet a therapist virtually, and you used to pay for free, but you can also try different ones. If it doesn't work out, you get a new therapist, or you can find someone locally. I know a lot of insurances are covering therapy now, which is super helpful. There is an expense to it, but I think the more we can make it accessible for people, the better. Dave, what tools have you learned that help you on a daily basis from your therapy and counseling?
So it ties back into the operating in an emotional space in real time while communicating healthily during discomfort. Yeah, that's, you know what, I'm going to flip in my notes a little bit because I try to avoid the notes so I can practice clarifying and talking in the moment. But this one, I just want to make sure I have some things here.
Yeah, so a little behind the scenes thing. I always send my guest a show sheet kind of with some of the generic questions so they can prepare if they want to prepare. Because I do think it's important to come as a guest. When I'm a guest on the podcast, I try to come as prepared as possible. So I want my guest to come as prepared as possible. So I'm glad you have notes, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate that for clarifying. And I'm glad I wrote these notes because I have some pretty good things. It helps with so processing emotions and sitting with the discomfort and communicating healthily during that discomfort, impulse control, flexible thinking, how to be more understanding, how to have more humility, practice clarifying how I feel in real time. And this is a huge one. This is a huge one. Training and conditioning my mind to seek out healthier angles to view things and keep practicing with that, because for any given circumstance, there could be infinite ways to view that circumstance, all with a logical basis to them. Mm-hmm. So if you direct your effort and attention to the healthier angles, even if the unhealthy ones still have some believability to it, if you direct your attention and the effort to the healthier angles, you don't have space for as much space for the unhealthy stuff, and then the unhealthy stuff can matter less, and it can mitigate the intensity of that. And then it also helps ground you to think about things more rationally. So one of the best, that's how every day, all I think about is how grateful I am. And I have my therapist to thank for guiding me to practice that mindset. So every day, like, I can think of my life's terrible, or my life is great, or it's in the middle, or wherever on the spectrum, or a bunch of things at the same time, which is how it typically, or how it is. There's multiple things at the same time. But for me, I did have a tendency to just go to the unhealthy pain, and then it's conditioning. So conditioning myself to organically seek out healthier angles, and it just lifts my mood enormously.
And I think you're right, because I think you have to condition yourself, and we can get into the brain science of the neural pathways, but it's easy to go down on the negative route. Like, that's an easy path to go on, right? Oh, it's raining, it's miserable. You wake up and it's raining. Oh, today's going to be a horrible day. It's raining. It started off bad. And that can take your whole day down this spiral. But if you can condition yourself to go, wow, it's raining, maybe it won't be as hot, or, hey, the grass is going to grow, or my flowers are going to look nice tomorrow. And hey, I've got my umbrella and it's going to be fine. I'm not outside hardly at all, so I don't care if it's raining. It doesn't bother me. You can condition yourself to be on the more positive side. You're right. It does change not just your day, but it starts changing when you start doing that day after day. You build this conditioning and you build this mindset of positivity. I tell people I'm a realist who shades on the pessimist side, and part of that's just tempering expectations. And I want to make sure, like, I'm setting myself up. I'd rather I plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? Like, I'm going to plan that it's going to be the worst, and if it's better than that, I'm happy. And that part goes into contentment and complacency. And I don't want to be complacent. I want to be content, but I want to condition myself to, you're right, think positively about things. I get that with my son, who's 11. I go, what was the best part of today? And he goes, I don't know. And I go, no, every day you have to tell me what was the best part, because I need you to think about what's best. When I pick you up from school, I need to know what was good about school today. Because a lot of me goes, nothing. And I go, no, there has to be something. Even if it was just, I traded my yogurt for a candy bar. Just think of something, because I want him to get in this mindset of, like, constantly going, this was the good part of today. This was the good part of today. This was the good part of today. Look at that. Herm says, shout out Toronto Dave. A true
Herms,
gem. Herms, thanks for stopping by. We're going to get you on here eventually, Herms, to talk about something.
the legend.
One of my things that I've got from counseling is just mindfulness of being kind of, you were talking about in the moment and sitting with that discomfort. My counselor was like, hey, if you have an itch, don't itch it. And I was like, why would I not? He's like, just sit with the itch for a minute. And I was like, that's ridiculous. He's like, no, just be there and think about the itch. He's like, and you realize it's not something you necessarily need to scratch right away. And I'm like, I just want to itch it. And it's like, okay, now you can itch it because you've thought, like, you've sat with it and you've processed it a little more, and just being mindful of like, this is where I'm at. Like, this isn't, a work email may come through and it's, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. No, it's not the end. No one's gonna die. Take 3 seconds, sit there and go, take a deep breath in, hold it, let it out, and go, okay, this isn't the end of the world. It's just a minor blip, and this is how and you can get yourself off that, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this crazy thing's happening. You go, okay. And then you can kind of process things and you can move on, and just being mindful of like where you're at and what's around you and the true stakes of things. So I think sometimes we catastrophize things and go, oh man, this is the worst thing ever. No, it's not the greatest thing ever, but it's also not the end of the world, and you'll get through it and you will get by. So let's talk about journaling, because I know journaling is a big part that a lot of therapists recommend and encourage. I believe you journal. I used to journal a lot. I don't journal nearly as much as I should now. Do you journal? What do you like about journaling?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I do like journaling, but it's not something that I necessarily do every day, 365 days a year. It's more if I have a goal in mind, if I'm trying to accomplish something, clarify a certain area of thoughts. This is how I operate is I like to write things down just because it helps clarify my thoughts. And then once they're better clarified, I throw away the notes and try to feel it better. So it's like just to get it out of my mind and onto a paper so I can just better see what's going on.
Yep.
And then what I like to do is not even read it again. Just like maybe read it once just to see what I wrote.
Yeah.
And then crumble it up and throw it away.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because there is something powerful about getting something and either speaking it or writing it down. And what journaling is not, it's not like sitting out of bed and like, dear diary, today I felt sad. It can be that, but that's not generally what it is. It's just writing like a stream of conscious thoughts or just thoughts. A lot of times what I do is I'll write out like a thought. Maybe it's like 2 sentences, and then I'll just go through word by word and go, is that really the term? So today at work, my boss pissed me off because he told me I didn't do a good job. Let's just take that. Then I go, well, pissed me off. What's a better term for that? Made me mad. Well, did he really make me mad, or did he make me angry? Did he frustrate me? And it's like, okay, and I kind of like go through this. I just cross it off, put words out of across it, and then just keep going, like, and kind of narrow it down. It's like, was it my boss or was it his boss? And then it's like made me mad. It's like, what are these other things I can break up and make and maybe expand on or contract on or find better words for? And that's how I journal. It's like these free flowing kind of like spider webs of, this is really, yeah, I was angry, but was I really angry? And there's this beautiful, I probably should find a picture somewhere of have you seen those word wheels?
Yeah. Yeah. The feelings wheel. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I love it. I love that so much.
I love them too. I think they're great. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of one here and show it to our wonderful audience.
I find them so helpful.
They are super helpful. And so as someone who writes on a regular basis, these do really help me with this. So I will bring up this feeling wheel.
Yes.
So you can see here on the right is this feeling wheel, and I'll blow it up so we can see it bigger. Well, I guess that really didn't help. There's this feeling wheel here. This is not helpful at all. But basically what it has is, if you're angry, if you are, let me go back because it was bigger when I had it normal size. If you are angry, you can go over you jealous, aggressive, hostile, frustrated, and then goes, well, you left. If you were jealous or bitter, were you left out? And you can kind of these feeling wheels. So if you're ever feeling something, the feeling wheels is a great thing to look up. I really enjoy them as well. I think it just gets you to that better word. And there's words on there too. Like if I'm joyful, was it because I was excited, hopeful, playful, cheerful? Was I optimistic or energetic? And it just allows you to get more of a nuanced word for what you're feeling. I think that's super helpful. And that can help me when I'm journaling. If I go, I was angry and I go through the feeling where then maybe I just look up synonyms for angry and it's like I was enraged. It's like, well, I wasn't enraged. I was maybe mildly upset, right? And because angry can be anything from enraged to mildly annoyed, and anger is such a broad term. I really want to fix which end of angry I was, or I was really happy. Was I like super joyful, or was I just like pleasantly smiling? Like it's a vast variety and getting more nuance in your feelings. So journaling can really helpful. You brought up a topic that we talked about a little before then about flexible thinking, which I think is super helpful because most people are very rigid in general in their life and in their thought processes and then just how they operate as a daily basis. So being flexible thinking, can you talk a little about what flexible thinking is and kind of how you incorporate that?
I would love to. I'm very happy to talk about this subject because flexible thinking, let's say rigid thinking and inflexible thinking was one of my all-time biggest struggles for so long. And I'll try to give my best interpretation of it or how I see it. It's not removing angles. It's allowing yourself to feel and think one thing, but not discard other ways to think. So you can hold different thoughts at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm upset, but I can also understand why this happened. So it's not fighting away and discarding one way in favor of another. It's allowing that area to exist while creating space for other areas to exist simultaneously. So you don't have to, like, let's say you can allow yourself to be honest. You can allow yourself to be honest because if you're feeling a certain way and you're like, I don't want to feel this way, it's if you fight that and see, I feel maybe I'm getting a little off track with the flexible part, but it's allowing space for multiple things to exist at the same time.
Yeah, I always say, we talk to our son about this, like it's an and, not an or. So let's put it in football terms for people. The Jets had a bad season. And that's a rigid way of thinking. The Jets had a bad season and they are set up for the future. The Bears had a bad season and they just hired Ben Johnson so things can be better. The Jets had a bad season and they have a high draft pick, right? So it's bad on one hand. It's not all or nothing. It's both. It was a bad season, but there is hope for the future, and that's kind of how I think about it. It's the and, not the or, and it's because it is multiple things at once. It's not all or nothing. And flexible thinking can be really important. So we're going to go to our last section. We're going to do a flexible thinking draft. And Dave and I are going to do a 3-round draft on different draft strategies. So we go into fantasy football every year with this draft strategy. And, the fantasy footballers say be water, which again is just flexible thinking. People say don't get locked into a strategy. So what we're going to do is we're going to draft our draft strategies as a way of thinking of flexible thinking. So, Dave, I'm going to give you the first pick. You can draft any sort of draft strategy that you want for your first pick. And we'll do a snake draft. You'll do 1, I'll do 2, 3, and then you do 4, 5, and I'll do 6.
Yeah, so I'm going to go wide receiver early and often. That's my number 1 pick in the name of flexibility because you typically need more wide receivers and you can get by inputting other positions later. That obviously if you take a quarterback really late, they're not going to be as good as the ones you take early. But if you take a quarterback early, you leave less room for an option to take a quarterback or not later. You're more inclined or incentivized to take other positions. So if I go wide receiver early, just because you need more of them, typically, it frees me up as I go later for other decisions. So I'm going to go wide receiver heavy early and often is my number one.
It's a good one. My number one is going to be hero RB for kind of the same thought. Is if I can get an RB, one of the top RBs in the first round or early second round if I'm drafting late, it does allow me to be flexible later because I find when you do like a zero RB build or one of those other type builds that we might draft later, you kind of back yourself into a corner at times and it doesn't allow you the flexibility later on. So I want to take a guy, kind of a set it and forget it position guy, and I can fill in that other RB spot later, but I want to get that one key fixture, get me a Saquon or a Jonathan Taylor or a Bijan Robinson who I can just lock into my lineup. I don't have to worry about it in this way. If value drops to me in rounds 3 and 4, I can pick another running back if I want, or I can go wide receiver or whatever because I know I have that cornerstone. So my first pick is going to be hero RB as my first one. I just think it allows me to be flexible later. My second one is going to be wait on QB, and I like this because it allows me to be flexible at the top, but it also allows me to be flexible on what waiting means. Is waiting the 5th quarterback off the board? Is waiting the 10th quarterback off the board? Is waiting the 15th quarterback off the board? And I can be flexible in that of what waiting means. And I want to have that flexible thinking of going, hey, I know I'm not going to take Mahomes or Allen early, but I might take a Joe Burrow if he's the 6th quarterback off the board, but I think he should be the 4th. And for me, that's waiting. I may take a Jared Goff at QB8 when all the top guys have gone. I can be flexible if Jared Goff's value is lower, and I can play the value, and I can be flexible of what that means and how long I wait. So I'm going to take that as my second one. So I took hero RB for the flexibility that it gives me after I take that cornerstone, and then flexible thinking in waiting on QB because I can be flexible on what waiting means.
This is fascinating because it's making me realize there's different ways to be flexible.
Yes.
I went for my strategy because I thought it was flexible in this way, but then I'm listening to you and I'm like, damn, he's making really good points that maybe almost stunned. Like it was just, you were making a lot of sense to me. So it's good that there's different ways to be flexible. So yeah, that's very interesting to me actually. So my next pick is no plan.
No plan. Okay.
No plan.
Best player available.
Best player available. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, best player available. Let the draft board play out how it goes and just be so free for each turn.
Well, that's a great plan, I think, at times. And, we always see these in leagues where you have the guy who, knows nothing about football, prints out his cheat sheet, an hour before the draft and somehow finishes it, second or wins the league because he was like, I just went off the draft sheet and that's who was available. He was the top rated guy in the draft queue. So I drafted him and it works out because, it just happens. And sometimes having no plan is really freeing and allows you to just kind of go, well, this is who everyone is saying should be the best player available. So I'm just going to take them. And with that, you're leaning on the consensus of all the experts that have put their time and energy into it versus trying to outthink the experts, I think, with some of these other strategies. So, yeah, best player available is super. And it's also freeing because you're not worried about it. You're not just I'll take whoever's next. I don't care. It's not like I need to get this guy. Or this is my sleeper. This is my stud. It just I'll take whoever's there. I don't care. And I think that's a really fun one. So you get a second one. You're doing a snake draft.
Yeah, I just want to say freeing was the exact word I was thinking of. So yeah. When you said that, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. And then also the freedom allows my thinking to be more grounded and clear just in and of itself. Just the operating freely, I feel like I make better decisions in that space because I'm more allowing myself to be more flexible. So let's go with my next draft strategy. We're narrowing it down here. So I'm going to say elite tight end early. That's my next one. Just because it's a single position and you can get an advantage there. But it feels like there's almost it's more risky So I guess it depends on your risk tolerance, and it's contingent on confidence in the rest of the draft to not lack in other positions if you sacrifice them to go tight end earlier. So now that I'm thinking it, it feels like maybe if I go tight end early, I need to be more confident in the rest of the draft to go how I want it. So it's a tricky one. I think I'm going to go elite tight end early just for the rare advantage possibility and hope things work out later. But it's difficult because it requires you to make up ground elsewhere, which means you got to be confident you can do that, which is tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah, it is tough to do, but I do think it's very much similar to my hero RB, where you're getting that cornerstone, set it and forget it piece. And then I do think it allows you to be kind of in that best player available for the rest of the draft. You're going, I just need everything. I mean, you're not trying to find the sleeper tight end. So there's a couple honorable mentions I'll mention before I make my pick. There's the zero RB, which has been super trendy the past few years. There's elite QB, draft into Mahomes or an Allen early. There is bully tight end or bully running back, where you just load up on 2 or 3 tight ends or 2 or 3 running backs to start. Same thing with, kind of that elite, bully wide receiver. You just draft a ton. The one I'm going to take, and the one I don't necessarily recommend as a draft strategy, but I think it works well with this flexible thinking concept, is what I call the trade bait strategy, where let's say you draft Mahomes in the second, or let's say you draft Josh Allen in the second round, you turn around and then take Lamar Jackson in the third with the hopes that you will trade him. Now, this does not always work out for people because you are dependent on someone needing your quarterback. But in terms of flexible thinking, it allows you to be flexible in what you do the rest of the season, because you may leave the draft and go, man, I need to trade him for a running back. But then 2 weeks in, your 15th round running back, Eureka Dowdle, is also the superstar, or you pick up, Bucky Irving off waivers, and all of a sudden you go, oh wow, I can really trade him for a tight end, a wide receiver, or another. Like it allows you to be flexible in that aspect. So when we're talking about flexible thinking, the trade bait can be interesting. And I always say this on the show, that fantasy should be fun. And if winning can be fun, but trading can be fun for you, and having that communication and that kind of camaraderie with your league mates in terms of like trade negotiation, if that's fun for you, maybe this is a strategy for you. If you're like, I don't care about winning, I just want to make trades because I think that's fun, and you may make 15, 20 trades a year, maybe the trade-based strategy allows you to be a little more flexible, because you go, yeah, I'm going to draft Josh Allen and Lamar thinking I'm going to trade Lamar, but someone might come in and want Josh Allen, and I go, oh, that's something I didn't think about. And it really does open the door for everyone. We know in traditional snake drafts, you can only get one of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, right? CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're only getting one of those guys. But if you do this trade bait and you take 2 elite quarterbacks, maybe you can get 2 of those guys on your team later on, because you can trade a Lamar for a Justin Jefferson, right? So it allows you to be, in this term of flexible thinking, it allows you to kind of reimagine how you can build a team and looking at these draft picks as assets instead of straight players. So it's not exactly the points Lamar gives you on your team, but maybe it's what Lamar can be turned into. And I think that when we're talking about flexible thinking, it sparked my intrigue of like, oh man, if I do this, what are the possibilities? And really, when you're looking to trade, the possibilities are endless. And you just never know what you could get for a guy. And if you're talking dynasty, it becomes even more crazy. Redraft, it's maybe a little more limited, but if you have one of these top assets, the world is your oyster. Like if you were somehow to be able to get Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, what you can trade Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson for is a king's ransom. And so you might go, man, I can get a Saquon and a Jaden Daniels. That'd be great. I can go get, Travis Kelce and an AJ Brown and K-Dot or something. Like you can just get this like massive haul, or else, and you go take one piece into 3 pieces, and allows you to reimagine your whole team, which I think is fun.
Yeah, two points. One, the fungibility of the tradable assets. It opens up the opportunities, like you were saying. And then also to tie it back into the counseling, it's trading is dependent and contingent on relationships. So it helps you practice relationship skills for fantasy football benefits at the same time.
Yes.
And so that's very interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, trades only happen when you have relationships. It's very rare that you message someone out of the blue and you get a trade done. You need to be communicating with them. And I talked about this with the drafts. if your live draft is the only time or your draft in general is the only time you're talking to your league mates, you're a bad league. You're a bad league member. Like, you just aren't doing it right. You need to be talking to them throughout the offseason, throughout the year. How's your day going? Building those relationships, because that's going to open up trade doors and trade windows for you. And you're right. It is about, as part of counseling, is having this relationship, being with people that, and having that safe space for trades, right? Of being able to, like, hey, I went off you this trade, and they're go, that's the dumbest trade I've ever heard. It's like, okay, cool. I was just offering you something, and not having them shut the door on you and having that space is like, oh, you gave me a bad trade, but here's what I was really thinking. Okay, well, cool. Let's come to an agreement there. So I do think a lot of the topics of counseling comes into trading in fantasy football, in terms of building relationships, having a safe space, having league members that are knowledgeable and trained, right? Because you always have those leagues where it's like the guy trades, Saquon Barkley for, Rashad White. It's like, that's the dumbest, like, what are you doing? It's like, I didn't know. It's like, well, you need to know. You need to have intelligent people. But this has been super fun, Dave. Thanks for coming and talking counseling. If you're watching or listening, go to counseling. Like, just do it for 6 months. Do 10 visits and let it and see how it goes, and see what could be. And don't expect to walk into counseling and you sit down and the guy's going to be like, or the governor's going to be like, okay, well, you have issues. Like, one session, they're going to talk about issues. I think a lot of people think they're going to walk in there and someone's just going to read them like a book. That's not how it is. You have to actually be an active participant in that. But I think counseling is super important. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys have any further questions about counseling, you can always reach out to me at the D Unit 13 on Twitter, or Dustin Ludke on Blue Sky. Toronto Dave, it's been scrolling at the bottom, at Toronto FF8. Hit us up. We'd love to just talk, help you guys out. Even if you're just like, I want to find counseling, or hey, this is something me and my counselor have talked about. What are your thoughts? We'd love to bounce some ideas off you. Dave, any last words for our listeners?
Yeah, two things that came to mind. One is, because therapy and counseling and life is about connecting, if you feel after however many sessions that you're not connecting with your therapist and you don't feel they're right for you, very much encouraged to try another one. The therapist I have now, she is got to be my fourth therapist that I've been in, and I've been with her for like 4 years now, maybe like for years. And if I stuck with other therapists that I may not have been happy with, or if I just stopped trying because of those experiences,
yep,
I wouldn't have been blessed with the therapist that I have today. And the last thing I want to mention is, there's actually a mental health group chat on Twitter. It's called Less Alone. You can message me and I can add you to the group, no questions asked. And it's just a safe space for people to just talk in a private group chat of, you can ask for help, but many times people just want to vent and just get something out there into the space. So people will be like, you know what, I'm not even looking for help. I just want to get this out of here. And people will like give it a heart or something, like a react or whatever. So it's called Less Alone. I'm in it. There is just over 40 people in it. I don't know how much longer I'm necessarily going to be on Twitter per se. But please message me, and I'd love to add you in there. No questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing that you started, just having that chat of just being able to be there and like just throw something out, just vent. You're not looking for answers. You're not looking for advice. You just want to get something off your chest. And I will say, back to your first comment, finding a therapist is like dating. You don't have to marry them. Like, you can go to someone for 2 or 3 visits and go, hey, we're just not clicking. Go to another one. Try them out until you find one that you click with, and you may click with them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but then after that you might maybe outgrow, and then maybe you need to find another one. Like, that's a natural part of counseling. It's not like you're going to be, yes, you theoretically could find a counselor with the rest of your life, but it might just be someone you're there with for 2 or 3 years, or someone you're there with just to work through a specific issue because that's maybe their expertise, and you go on to find someone else who deals with some other issues. And I think it's very healthy and important to find a therapist that you click with and that you feel comfortable with, and fits your time frame. I know here in Madison, finding a counselor is like, if you call today, they're like, oh, we got an appointment in 8 months. Well, 8 months is probably not quick enough for most people. So finding someone who works on your time frame, those are all important things. So it is a lot like dating. try it till you find one that works, and then stick with that one for a while. And make sure you click and make sure you go to help. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great discussion. This is what this podcast is all about: having these conversations, and a little bit of football, and kind of relating back to football, because I do think counseling will help people be on those flexible thinkings and be. It's not just all or nothing. It is an ands. There is positive ways to think about things, including your fantasy football team, including your football team that just lost in the playoffs. There's positive ways of thinking about that, so it's not this mood wrecker for your life. So, Dave, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week.